everyone. My name is Lauren, and this is the Teen Knits Podcast. And this is episode 8, I believe. I know it's been about a month since I've recorded, 4 weeks actually, and we'll get into why. But first, I want to welcome all new viewers, and I want to thank all returning viewers for coming back and watching. As I said, my name is Lauren. I'm Elbath21 on Instagram and Ravelry. And we have a Teen Knits podcast, Teen Knits being one word, group on Ravelry as well. Again, as always, I have Carl in my lap. He probably will not stay very long. But he always sits in my lap and then decides that there's other things he'd rather see out the window than sit in Mama's lap while she pulls out all her yarn projects. What are you doing? So it's been 4 weeks since I've last podcasted. Many of you know that I am a college professor, and this time of year is the end of our semester. So it's been quite busy around these parts. A lot of grading, a lot of preparation, and tying up loose ends at the end of the semester. I also went to the Knit Local Getaway last weekend, which is the last weekend in April, which was in Washington County, New York, and I'll talk about that more a bit later, and to what I did and all the fun stuff that I had then. What are you doing? All right. Okay. So if you hear him purring, Carl purring, he's quite content now. So today I am drinking some tea from the Eastern Shore Tea Company. And it is blueberry lemon is the flavor. They are individually wrapped little bags. It's not loose tea. They're individually wrapped little bags. And it's nice that they don't have little string and tags attached to them. That's actually just more waste when they have the string and the tags. So I'm glad that they don't. So I'm drinking it now. It does contain some black tea, so it does have caffeine. That's the primary tea base. It has blueberry, lemongrass, and some lemon flavoring in it. And when you initially smell it, it smells a little like lemon. It does have very subtle blueberry and lemon flavors to it. So it's pretty mild, nothing too strong, and actually quite enjoyable. I actually got this tea last weekend. One of the girls I was sharing a room with, Amy, she's Amos GW on Instagram, and she was very kind and gave me this tea and another one, spiced apricot tea bags with cinnamon and cloves. I haven't tried this one yet, but I have this one today, and so thank you, Amy. And Amy also gave me a little skein of marionette yarn. Sorry, I have cat fur in my nose. As everyone knows, this time of year, when it starts to warm up, pets shed their winter coats, and therefore Carl is shedding his winter fur, and it's around the house and apparently now in my nose. So I got this little skein. Purple is my favorite color, and she knew that. And then I didn't realize until I got home when I pulled it out that there was a stitch marker attached, and it's a little teacup and saucer. And so that is really awesome. Thank you, Amy. It was very, very kind of you. And every time I look at the tea or even look at the mini, it brings back good memories and smiles from our time last weekend. So back to the tea. Again, it does have some caffeine. It is very subtle, as good. I really like it. And the Eastern Shore Tea Company also has, I saw it on here before, easternshoretea.com. They are located in Lutherville, Maryland. So if anyone is interested, you can find it online as well. All right, so you know we're here because it's a knitting podcast. Oh, one more thing before I continue. You can see that I have a new wall art. A couple weeks ago, I went to a paint and sip, and this is what we painted. I don't really have painting artistic abilities. My artistic abilities come out in my knitting. So the fact that this actually came out pretty good. You can see the waterfall and the splash and the trees. It reminds me of the cherry blossoms. I was pretty proud of my painting handiwork. So now instead of looking at a bare wall behind me, there's a nice painting. Okay, so now to the knitting. I do have some in the last month, even though I've been quite busy with work, and normally I'd probably show more in 4 weeks time, more finished objects. I only have a couple. I have my April Desert Vista Dye Works monthly socks. Okay, and these are out of the James Bond Octopussy colorway, and they're just vanilla socks. It was on the Viso base, and I used US 2s. Carl, your fur is everywhere. So I'm pretty happy with those. I also was working on a test knit for Brazen Raven Fiber Arts, and it was a cowl called the Frog Pond Cowl, and I did finish it. So here it is, all completed. And so here it looks like frog legs. And so those are the cables. It was a pretty simple knit, not that hard. You have to have some cabling experience or knowledge of cabling in order to do it, but nothing really intricate and crazy cables. So it's all blocked. Likely not going to be wearing it this year, although today and tomorrow's weather might call for it, as winter seems to be coming back. It was 75 degrees 2 weeks ago, and tomorrow's high is going to be in the mid-30s and feel like it's in the 20s. So on May 8th. But anyway, this is the Frog Pond Cowl by Brazen Raven Fiber Arts, and I use Sequoia Dye Works yarn in the Kale colorway. I don't think that this dyer is dyeing anymore, because when I did go to look them up, I did not find anything, any active yarn. This yarn was in my stash, and I believe I bought this in the Pacific Northwest about 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, when I was out. I may have gotten this when I was in Vancouver. And then the last, and for that I used US size 4. We're going to come back to that pattern and that designer in a little while because she's offered a giveaway, a very nice giveaway. The other finished object that I have is a Mother's Heart wrap by Amy Meeks and Debbie Reese, who are the Periscoping sisters. And they had a mystery knit along that started the weekend of Easter. So I think the first clue came out around April 14th-ish. And then the next several Fridays, a clue has come out with 4 clues. The last clue coming out this past Friday, which was pretty much just the bind off for this wrap. I used yarn from the Tilting Planets. I showed some of her other yarns last time, and I used the Wednesday colorway. So here's a label, Tilting Planets, or Tilting Planet. This colorway is called Wednesday. It's 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and it was 437 yards for 100 grams. And she's Tilting Planet at Etsy. I really like this yarn. It's the first time using her yarn. I really liked it. It was nice and soft, squishy, really easy to work with. And then even though it is fairly a neutral color, when I did wash my finished object, I didn't see any of the dark colors bleeding, which is nice. So this wrap was a mystery knit along by the Periscoping sisters. And as I said, their last clue came out this past Friday. So I did clue 1 the week after it came out, before clue 2 was released. And then I got busy, school, work, and lots of grading and research papers and everything. So I didn't do clue 2 before clue 3 came out. Clue 3 came out right before I went away last weekend, and then clue 4 came out this past Friday. So I had done clue 1 before, and that's it before everything came out. But this weekend and late last week and this weekend, I think Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and yesterday, I ended up doing all the clues. It was a pretty easy knit. the pattern was very well written. The clues were very well written, and explanations, and I really enjoyed it. So those of you that are working on this mystery knit along and do not want to see the whole thing, probably want to look away. But this is what it looks like. So it's an asymmetrical kind of shawl, and this was clue 1, and it had an eyelet section to it, so it started off small and got a little bigger, and it has this kind of mock I-cord border on it. And then one thing that I have noticed, at least with Amy Meeks' patterns, is that when she changes sections, sometimes she has this garter ridge. So you have a garter ridge at the end of clue 1 before you get into what was part of clue 2 and a new texture region. And so this section here is mimicking flowers, these textured flowers. And I put some pictures last night up on Instagram, more close-ups of the textures, so you can see that the textures of the flowers throughout this section. They were actually pretty easy to make. The instructions were really clear. Then you had another garter ridge, and then more of that eyelet section that you had at the beginning, and then this garter ridge, which was the end of or beginning of clue 3, and then end of clue 2, and then clue 3 included these mountains, and they were pretty easy. The section went pretty quickly, and then clue 4 was just this garter ridge and then the bind off at the top. So it went pretty quickly. As I said, I did clues 2, 3, and 4 in about 3 days. I enjoyed it. I was watching some TV and working on it, and had a cat in my lap like I do right now for most of it. Carl was a big assistant. And this is how much yarn I had left when I was done. It's only a couple grams. I know a lot of people, depending on their gauge, were saying they were running out of yarn. So in the last clue, Debbie was talking about what modifications you can make if you're running low on yarn and stuff like that. So I actually did have enough that was left over. I did use US 6s for this. I think the pattern calls for 5s or 6s. I used the US 6s. I cast off. Sorry, so it's binding off. It's not casting off. It's casting on and binding off. I bound off last night, and then I blocked it, so I didn't weave in the ends yet. So I will do that today, now that it's all blocked. But I just picked it up off the blocking boards, the mats on the floor. Before podcasting, it was dry, and Carl was sitting on it and enjoying it. So it is really pretty. Let's see again. And both Debbie and Amy really liked how it came out from my pictures on Instagram, and they did say how it is pretty cool that they have an idea and they design something, and when it goes out into the world that they see all these different interpretations, the different yarns, and how people work up their patterns. So I'm sorry, my leg was falling asleep because you're heavy. And so those are all my finished objects. I guess that's a decent amount in 4 weeks. I have done other knitting, some other works in progress, but nothing that is completely finished yet. So what I have as far as works in progress are, let's see, in my Suburban Stitcher bag, I have a pair of Atlantic Current socks. I meant to look up the designer on this and I forgot to. But they're the Atlantic Current socks, and this was some yarn that I was gifted. It is Vesper yarn, and it also has a heel on it that I've never done before, but it does have more of the heel flap and gusset versus an afterthought heel. I actually liked it, and this heel itself, Carl, My leg is falling asleep, buddy. Hurts. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, okay. You can see it has more of a texture to it, and I have partridge maybe. It was the first time I've done this particular heel pattern, and it definitely has more texture to it, so that I think that it would handle some of that wear and tear, like going in and out of shoes, a little better than just a regular stockinette heel flap. But I like the way it came out. It looks pretty good with this self-striping yarn. So I only have one sock done. I still have to do the second sock. So that is one of the works in progress that I have. Another one that I have is, Carl, I'm gonna have to move you. I'm gonna feel pins and needles here in a minute. Like, I was at the Knit Local Getaway last week. I had to finish up the first sock of the Atlantic Current socks, and then I started a vanilla sock, because when you're in a group of people and you're talking and you're knitting, the last thing you want to have to do is pay attention to a pattern, because you're going to be more likely to mess it up. So I was able to finish up the Atlantic Current socks. Oh, I found it. The designer, Melissa Tuttle Shibley, designed in 2014. It was in my iBook on my phone, and it wasn't at the top, so I had to look it up. So anyway, then I finished that sock, and then I cast on just a plain vanilla sock. And I'm making it for a coworker who's been extremely helpful and picked up a lot of pieces this semester. So she doesn't know she's getting them. I went into her office and asked her office mate if her office mate knew what size shoe she wore. And she goes, I don't know, but she might have a pair of shoes under her desk. And she did. So I went and looked at her sneakers and found out that what size shoes she wears. She's much bigger feet than I do. But this is Knit Picks Felici. It is the Lost Lakes colorway. And I've got, so one sock done. I have cast on the second one. I did that the other day. And I have some upcoming work meetings in the next few weeks that I'll be able to work on these. So here is what I have on the second sock. I think I've told you guys I like to do I've always done my socks cuff down. I've never done a toe up sock. I always do them one at a time. And I do about 10 rows of, which is about 1 inch for my gauge, of 2x2, knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, and then I just, for my plain vanilla, just knit away for the leg. And then sometimes, depending on where I am and what I'm doing, I'll put in waste yarn for an afterthought heel, or I'll do a different type of heel. But I think when I was doing this one, I was probably in a setting where I didn't want to look up a pattern for a different heel, so I put the waste yarn in for the afterthought heel, and then came back and did that at the end, and actually finished that, did it at a work meeting this past Thursday. The funny thing is that I can knit at work meetings and my coworkers don't know the socks are for them. That happened in the fall too. So this is one sock that I have. So I guess I have 2 hose, 2 single socks that need mates, and then I showed you last time another, sorry Carl, another sock that I was working on. This one, and I haven't started its mate yet because of other priority. I don't need its mate until September for this. The other ones are going to be sooner. So those are 2 socks I have in progress. For the May WIP 2017 in the Butt from the Down Sailor Studios podcast, I'm which this year they're having in a sense, a knit along where each month you finished a work in progress that's kind of been languishing that you started before 2017. So for this month, I have a baby blanket I started last year. I know, moving yarn. String, right? You like that. So obviously it's squinched up on the needles. And I'm holding the yarn double. It is Barocco Comfort. It's a purple and a tan color. I like this yarn when I'm making baby blankets. It's durable. It can go in the washer. I've made several in the past, and my friends who've had babies have said that it really holds up. So when I'm making baby blankets, I do really like to use this yarn. I did start it, I think, in like February or March of 2016, and put it down and didn't end up picking it back up. And I really should, before she gets too big and doesn't want a blanket. But if my niece is anything like my brother, she will like her blankie, and if I finish it soon enough, she'll like it, and maybe she'll carry it around everywhere she goes, and hopefully not be too big that she trip on it. So that's what I plan on finishing. And then, as you all know, we have our Amber O'Brien knit along that started April 1st and ends the end of June. Sorry, this fur is flying everywhere. And I've made a little progress on my miso, just a little bit more. And so I think this is going to be one of the primary things I work on as far as a non-sock knitting project. It's a pretty easy pattern. I'm using only one skein of yarn. You can make it larger and use more than one, but I'm only using one. Yes, hi. And I just need to sit down and work on it. I just haven't. I've had other shiny objects, in a sense, in my face going, hey, knit me, knit me. So I picked it back up, started knitting on it, and it's looking pretty good. It's not very hard, as I said, and I think that if I just sit down and spend time on it, it will go pretty quickly. Amba does have many multicolor or 2 or 3 color shawls. This one was a one color, and I picked it because I was testing out this yarn which is Spencer Hill naturally dyed yarn. And I've talked about it before. This is her singles base, which she's now actually selling. It's the Ruth base, and this color is called Wine Glass. I don't know if she has any more of this in her shop or if she's selling Wine Glass, but that's what this one is. So I was testing the yarn for her and only had one skein, and so I knew I needed to pick a project that was calling for something around 400 yards. So the miso shawl actually fit that. So that's why I've chosen to do the miso. I would like to do some of the other Amba O'Brien shawls that are 2 and 3 colors. So hopefully I'll get there sooner than later. I mean, as always, I think a lot of us have a lot of other works in progress, but those are the ones that I'm working on at the moment. So as far as my plans going forward, I'll see you later. Sorry, my leg was falling asleep. Plans going forward, I still have to do my May Desert Vista Dye Works. Carl's playing with a paper bag under the table. I have to do my Desert Vista Dye Works May socks, and this is the color that I'm going to use. It is Borscht is the colorway. What are you doing? Sorry. Carl was trying to stuff his head inside of a paper bag. No, Carl. Sorry. Okay. So this is Desert Vista Dye Works Borscht colorway. It reminds me of May when things are really green and the flowers are blooming, and I can stay outside right now. that my lilac trees in the backyard are blossoming, the tulips are in bloom, the daffodils have been in bloom for a few weeks. Everything is really starting to look like spring, and this reminds me of spring. So I thought it'd be a fitting color for May socks. Whether I do these vanilla or I put some other pattern into them, I'm not sure yet, but I'll probably wind this yarn up today or tomorrow so I can get started on them. And then pretty much my plans going forward are finishing some of these whips. I do have 3 socks that don't have mates at the moment, so they need to be finished. I want to finish my miso. I do have that kitty vertebrae that I had started and haven't made progress on at all since I last podcasted and talked to you. So that's also the knitting content that I have, my projects. I do want to talk to you about the Knit Local Getaway that I went to last weekend. And this was a weekend retreat that was put together by Sarah. She goes by Sarah Pomegranate. Her podcast is Yarns at Yin Hoop. And this retreat was in Washington County, New York. And I guess every year, it's the first I've heard of it, and I've lived in New York most of my life. But it's the Washington County Fiber Tour. And it was last Saturday and Sunday, and for this retreat, there were about 20 women that all stayed together in this lodge, about 2 or 3 people per room, and it was kind of like being at camp / in the dorms, you know, flip-flops in the shower, shower caddies, those kind of things. But it was a lot of fun, and it was my first retreat that I'd been to. And so it was really cool. I got there, I left work on the earlier side when I could, came home, fed Carl, finished packing my stuff, and then left. Got stuck in a little bit of Albany traffic because this was a little bit north of Albany, New York. And then I walked in and all these women were knitting. And normally it's me who's the only one knitting. So that was pretty cool. And then, you know, dropped off my stuff, unpacked, kind of took a few minutes to myself to say, okay, you're here, you know, gather my thoughts. And then I went out and started meeting all the other women. The only person I knew was Amy. I mentioned her before. We met at New York Sheep and Wool back in October, so we didn't really know each other all that well, but we met in October and we'd kept in contact. And Amy's the one who actually told me about this retreat. So thanks, Amy. I had a lot of fun. I settled in, and then we're knitting, and everyone else started to show up, and so that was pretty cool. People came from New Jersey, from other parts of New York, from Connecticut, from Massachusetts, and one person even came in from Pittsburgh. So I think that was probably the furthest away because she flew. But Sarah herself is from the eastern part of Pennsylvania, and she drove up. And so that night, we all hung out, got to know each other a little bit, and then the next morning, by like 8 o'clock, when everyone was up and functioning, and you go out and everyone's sitting there knitting, and I'm like, wow, I'm not the only one. So that was pretty cool. I did make a lot of progress on that first sock for my coworker, and everyone was amazed at actually how quickly I was able to knit on that tube of the sock. And so then on the Saturday, we had breakfast, and the fire tour of the farms opened at 10. So the first 2 or 3 places we all went together, we were staying in Greenwich, New York, and pretty much right near the farm where St. Mary's on the Hill was located. So that was our first stop, and they have cashmere goats, and they had young lambs, and they had different types of sheep as well. So that was pretty cool. That was our first stop, and we were all there together. Then we all went over to the Bat and Kill fiber mill, and we had a tour of the mill, and that was pretty neat. So you could see where the bags of dirty fleece came in, and where they would wash it, and where they would, fluff it, and then ultimately process it into roving, and then spin it into yarn. That was pretty neat to see. And I did purchase some stuff there, some yarn there, but I will show it and talk about it when I start knitting with it. And then a lot of us kind of diverged from there. We went to Ensignbrook Farm, and there was a lot of nice yarn, and could have spent a whole lot more money that weekend, but I didn't. So this was kind of the map of Washington County, and so we were staying in this area, and then over right like number 10, and then we went to 9 to 8, then we went up to 3, which is Crazy Legs Farm, and then over to Salem. We went to Quarry Ridge Alpacas, and I got some yarn that was an alpaca angora blend, so it is really, really soft. I have some ideas of what I want to do with it. I'm just it's a DK weight, so I just have to figure out the right pattern with the yardage that I have for that. So after driving around, Amy drove that day. I was going to drive, but did not sleep well the night before, so I was pretty tired. Amy drove, and then we were with Laura and Maya. 4 of us were in the car. We went to quite a few farms that day, and then we got back to the lodge and hung out, and we ordered pizza that night. Everyone kind of fended for themselves for dinner that night. So the 4 of us had pizza, and then everyone hung out and knit, and it was a lot of fun. And everyone was working on different projects, so when you see that, you get a lot of inspiration of new ideas or new patterns that you want to knit, or colorways or different types of yarn, and so that was really, really cool. The one thing I do want to say, when we did get there, we did get a little goodie bag. It has stitch marker. It had a mini in it, and this is from Foster Sheep Farm. There was a little bar of soap from Saratoga Suds. There was a little button that says Knit Local from Katrinkles, and a little lavender sachet, in addition to a stitch marker on the front. And in addition to these bags, when we got there, Fernanda, she had sewn bags for all of us. Now, this is the front. It says by Fee Creations. And this is the back. And everyone's was different. And on the inside, mine is blue and white polka dots. So that was really, really nice of Fernanda to do, to make all of these bags for each one of us. I think I thanked her about 5 times all weekend long, and feel like that wasn't enough times of thanking. So Fernanda, if you are watching, thank you. It was very nice of you. I actually absolutely love the bag. I did have to leave early on the Sunday. I think I may have mentioned, I don't know if I said that. I had a lot of work to do when I got home, pretty stressed out in this semester, a lot of research papers to grade. And I didn't get to go to the lunch at Dancing U Farm, but maybe next year. But I would go back. It was a great time. I really look forward to next year, and I'm really happy that I made a lot of great friends, and that I met other people that were like me that wanted to knit all the time. So in the last podcast, we had a giveaway thread that I opened for the Slip and Swirl socks by Christy Barnwell from the In a Snit podcast. She's Chris Loves Wool on Instagram and Ravelry. And she had designed the Slip and Swirl sock pattern. And so we were having a giveaway for it. And right before podcasting, I used random number generator. We had 9 entries. So I put in posts 2 through 10. And it came up with number 7, which is Laughing Coyote 3, who is Rebecca from Minnesota. So congratulations, Rebecca. I will wait a few days. Hopefully you'll hear this, maybe message me before I give Christy your name for her to send you the pattern. So that was pretty exciting. I really like my socks. I've actually worn them a few times since it's still been a little chilly here in New York. The other giveaway that we are going to be starting that is new, I alluded to a little bit before, is from Brazen Raven Fiber Arts. And I test knit the frog pond cowl for her, and she was really, really nice enough to send a package. I'm not going to open it. There's yarn and there's stitch markers in the package, and I will put in a picture of this, the contents, because she sent me a picture before she sent it. And she will send the winner a copy of the frog pond cowl. I don't know if it is officially published yet, but I know the winner, she will send a copy of the cowl, the pattern too. So it was really, really kind of her. But we have a prompt this week, and it's a little more in depth than a simple giveaway because there's yarn, stitch markers, and a pattern. So the prompt for this giveaway is, what was your favorite item that you've knit, and why? And that was your biggest knitting fail, and why was it your biggest knitting fail? So those are the things that I want to hear from you, and I'll again do a random number before the next podcast to draw a winner. Now for me, one of my favorites, I don't know, there's a lot, but I think one of my favorites would be the Kale Afghan that I made for one of my best friends for her wedding about 7 years ago. And it took me months to make it. It was a lot of cables, a lot of pieces, a lot of time. And I made her open it at the rehearsal dinner, and the words out of her mouth were, "Did you make this?" And I went, "Yes." "You really made this?" "Yes." And she was blown away. And she said that, I was talking to her recently, she said that they still use it. Now she has 2 kids, and it is a well-loved blanket. So I think that is probably one of my favorites that I've knit. And I think because of the reaction that she had when I gave it to her. And as far as the fail, that was kind of hard for me to think of. I don't really have a whole lot of fails because I don't like it. A lot of times I'll just pull it out and then you kind of forget about it. But several years ago on Knitty, I think it was called the Pine Cone cardigan or something. It had a pine cone motif it was kind of a lacy cardigan. And I'd say maybe that was my fail. It was great. I love the pattern. It came out great. But I think it had to do with the yarn, because the yarn was quite stretchy after I wore it. And a lot of times when I make a sweater, I have to add extra length to it, because otherwise when I raise my arms up in the air, my belly button sticks out. So I always have to add some extra length to sweaters. And so I did. And then I wore the cardigan, and it just stretched during the day. And so what went from probably like right below the hips was further down my thighs as the day went on. So I really liked it. I just think that the yarn for that pattern was not necessarily the right combination, and I probably shouldn't have added the extra repeat for added length. Because had I not added the extra repeat for the length, that stretching probably would have been actually just fine. So that's probably where I would say a fail. I wore it the one time and it's in the closet, and I probably should wash it and reblock it and see whether or not things will help. But we'll see. It's also short sleeves, so it has to be the right temperature. And it's still cold out. It was 75, as I said, 2 weeks ago, and tomorrow's temperature is going to be in the 30s and feel like it's in the 20s. And this is the last week of class and then finals. So after that, I'm not really wearing a whole lot of nice clothing on a regular basis. It's jeans and t-shirts or long sleeve t-shirts, depending on the weather, versus nicer tops or dress pants to work because I don't have to. So even though I have a lot of nice clothing for warmer temperatures, those temperatures don't usually end up happening when I have to dress nice for work. So we'll see. Maybe I'll fix that up this summer so it's ready for the fall. But I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have. I think that's all I have. I will share some new things. Hopefully I'll be able to podcast again in 2 weeks. That will be right after our graduation, our commencement at my college. I am still under obligation until the middle of June. We'll have a lot of meetings and workshops that will be fun. Some of them are academic in nature and some of them are not. There's a mix in there. So hopefully the next time I speak with you guys, I will be a lot more relaxed and I will have a lot more knitting time to get things done. I'm hoping to get a lot of stuff done this summer, use up some of my stash or more of it and have more going out than coming in, because that hasn't necessarily gone as well as I had planned so far for 2017. So that's my goal. And I hope all of you are well. I hope the last month has gone well for you guys, and I hope to talk to you again in 2 weeks. So have a happy spring, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.